Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon and wrestling with this wig. We are back with episode 2, which deals with a lot of major things. It focuses on the aftermath of the Battle of the Gullet, Aemond storming Harrenhal, Rhaenyra taking King's Landing and leaving a wake of blood behind her. Now, though I was a bit sour on last week's episode, I actually felt this one felt like we were back to where the show used to be at. It does take a lot of creative liberties with the book, but I enjoyed them far more than the changes last week. Throughout this video, we're going to be pointing all them out, discussing the big Easter eggs, reveals, and basically just going through the episode. So come with us as we break down the entry and talk about everything within it.
Dead, so that I may sit upon a throne of swords.
Will you let them die in vain?
Now, as always, we open with the tapestry that shows the entire history of the Targaryens up until now. If you don't skip the credits, then you'll see that there's now some brand new additions which show the events of last week. Firstly, we have Lohar fighting against Corlys Velaryon, and then transition to the death of Jacerys. We then open on a similar shot to where we ended things, with his body floating in the water. The fire burns overhead, and a body then sinks down past the camera before we transition to the surface. It's such a poetic moment, and the incredible string arrangements really elevate the next few shots as the sailors burn. We have the dragon riders desperately searching for Jace's body, which is then returned to Dragonstone. He then gets the Spider-Man 2 on the train treatment as the dragon handlers carry him in. It does add quite a lot, and the book is actually quite light on these details, but it does say, the Valyrian fleet lost almost a third of its strength. Thousands died. Yet none of these losses were felt so deeply as that of Jacerys Velaryon, Prince of Dragonstone, and heir to the Iron Throne. It's a crushing scene as he's carried in, and I really wish Season 2 had last week's episode as its finale. We then would have had a mirror of Season 1, which ended with Jacerys' death at the hands of a rogue dragon. Season 2 then could have opened with the aftermath, and it could have been like poetry they rhyme. However, we mentioned last week that there were also supposed to be 10 episodes in Season 2. So with Season 3, Episode 1 being a massive battle, and this episode setting up what's next, it felt very much like traditional Game of Thrones. For example, Game of Thrones Season 2 had the Battle of Blackwater Bay in Season 2 Episode 9, and then Episode 10, things dealt with the aftermath. Season 3 then had the Red Wedding in Episode 9, and then Episode 10 dealt with the aftermath. And that may have potentially have been the original plan. But yeah, we then see Sir Laurent appear to greet the rider. And he's deaf's getting fired, mate. And I mean fired, like literally, like from a dragon. But he was of course convinced by Jace that following the oath of the Queen's Guard meant preventing the Queen from fighting at the Gullet. But I think a similar thing probably would have happened to her if she had have been there. It's clear that everyone feels like this is a loss though, even though the Blacks came out victorious.
The battle.
'Tis won.
This is such a hard line as well, and the delivery really hammers home how much this was a bittersweet victory for them. The Triarchy have been smashed, but the Crown Prince is dead, Driftmark is burned, and the Valyrian fleet's in ruin. Now it seems like the writers may have taken the delivery of Corlys's line,
If this be victory, I hope I never see another.
and given the sad delivery of that to this new one. Because yeah, the delivery later on, I don't know, just felt a bit meh. I don't know if it's like the script or the direction, but dear me, he sounded kind of like Keith Chegwin in Extras.
Because I buried my sister today.
Anyway, skipping ahead there, but Jace's body's brought in front of Rhaenyra, who thinks he's just lying down on the job as she can't face the reality that he's dead. Building out from the cutting of the dress scene last week, it seems like they're slowly building towards the Mad Queen. Driven by grief, Rhaenyra becomes vengeful this episode, rather than just being like, what would you have me do? For like 12 episodes like they've had in the past. In this moment though, we really see the madness creeping in as she starts chatting to his corpse and asking what he's done. It's yet another tragic loss for the Queen as she's now lost both of her strong children, had a miscarriage, lost her dad, and is just getting faced with loss after loss. Now, beyond this, you could also argue that the inaction and protection that she gave Jace eventually led to his death, caused him to want to take risks, and he was reckless because he felt like she'd held him back. The Queen is then overcome with grief, which leads Lauren to pull her off her son's body. He says that he's failed her and then offers up his life as forfeit. At the moment though, she's got no time for his sacrifice as it won't bring Jace back. Now this doesn't happen in the book, but it might be foreshadowing something that I'll talk about in the spoiler section. It also reminds me of Eric taking his own life after he killed his brother on Dragonstone. In general, I think the theme of this episode is about the cost that often comes with victory. Rhaenyra eventually gains a seat on the throne, but it comes at the cost of her sons and countless other people. Everyone just ends up miserable, and the future they were fighting for has been completely destroyed. Now, if you find yourself holed up on Dragonstone or just in the house watching TV while you're sat on your phone, you could be earning money right now playing mobile games. PlayZone lets you earn real money, no gimmicks, no paying, just playing. PlayZone is completely free to download, and once you install it, you just need to grant permission to track your game progress. You can get access to an endless library of fun mobile games, and some of the ones I've been playing are Fish of Fortune, Merge Cooking, and also Mob Control. It's made by a legit German company called Just Dice, who actually partner directly with game developers. Those game developers want more loyal players, and they pay PlayZone, and PlayZone then shares a portion of that revenue back with you. Like I said, there's loads and loads of games on there, and you can probably play the games you already love. The more you play as well, the more that you earn. Your rewards pile up and you can turn them into real payouts. You can also cash out starting from just $10. PlayZone even lets you earn gift cards from PayPal or Amazon, and it's super straightforward. It's real money, zero cost to start, endless variety, and your earnings keep getting better the longer that you use it. You can even earn more with the cashback feature where you make an in-app purchase. So start turning your gaming sessions into real money. The link to download PlayZone is also down in the description, and again, it's free, so you've got absolutely nothing to lose and simply cash to gain. Give it a try and you'll also get a welcome bonus to kickstart your journey. Go play your favourite games and earn rewards now using PlayZone. Thanks. We then cut to more of the aftermath of the Battle of the Gullet as the Valyrian men kill all the Triarchy remnants. Alan is carrying on his search for Corlys and he's using a rowboat to get around, desperately looking for his dad. We then cut to the Vale and Rhaenyra's returned there after accidentally causing Jacerys death. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o. More like how not to train your dragon, eh? Nah, but I think this kind of plays into the idea of how the dragons can give power but can also take it away. The Targaryens used them to reign over the Seven Kingdoms, but a lot of them had no idea what they were doing. They weren't like a nuke where you could point and control it and choose when to fire, and we have seen twice now how two disobedient dragons have caused more conflict. Both Luke and Jace suffered a similar fate because people arrogantly thought they held power over these creatures. Feel like them fighting them is like me fighting this wig. You guys cannot see it, but every time I talk, some hair goes in my mouth and I have to keep brushing out the way. The editors are doing a fantastic job, I must say. Anyway, this is very much a full circle moment for Rhaenyra as she's at the same gate that she left at in season 2 to go and look for Sheepstealer. Lady Jane then appears and the princess asks for help. She needs asylum as the Blacks will be searching for the mystery dragon rider and also the Greens won't want her either. The major thing about the dragon seeds is that they tipped the scales of power and meant that one side's dragons vastly outnumbered the other. Now in the book, after Rhaenyra arrives at the Vale, she ends up staying there for the rest of the story. Her egg then hatched a dragon named Morning near the end of the Civil War, but it didn't really have any impact on the conflict. As we mentioned in last week's breakdown as well, Rhaenyra in the show is being combined with the character Nettles. She was actually one of the dragon seeds in the book alongside Ulfhew and Adam. She tamed Sheepstealer by feeding it a sheep every day and was a bastard just like the rest of them, whereas Rhaenyra's accepted as a royal. Both flew at the Battle of the Gullet though, but Nettles had control of her dragon. They then celebrated the victory after, but out of all the dragon seeds, Nettles was the only one who didn't relish in it. So this scene kind of feels like a version of Nettles' post-battle feelings. She had flown with the others, fought as bravely, burned and killed as they had, but her face was black with smoke and streaked with tears when she returned to Dragonstone. It's here where their stories greatly diverge, as Nettle returned to Dragonstone, but Rhaenyra, it seems, is going back to the Vale. Now, though the lady suspects that Rhaenyra will be hunting her, Rhaenyra thinks that no one saw it was her. I do even wonder, right, if Daemon will finally be a decent father to her, which could change what happens next compared to the book with Nettles. But I think what Jane does next is kind of a way to get back at Rhaenyra. The pair had a very thorny relationship in season 2 as Lady Jane was offered a dragon to protect the Vale, but instead received 2 children, Rhaenyra and a tiny little dragon. So she hasn't really got what she wanted. Rhaenyra then asks,
Do you want a dragon or not?
which calls back to how Jane felt deceived when she expected a massive dragon to defend her kingdom. So Rhaenyra is once more being bold and offering protection with Sheepstealer. I do wonder as well if it's going to be a Faustian deal, as Sheepstealer will probably burn the whole place down. Jane then says the Vale is lost and that she doesn't wish to see her again, but also says she cannot stop a dragon from going where it pleases. So it seems like plausible deniability. In the book, she did actually have Joffrey's dragon Tyraxes at the Vale, but he was put on the ship to Pentos in the show. We then go to the soldiers drinking and celebrating their victory over the Greens. It's very gladiator-like, or at least to me, but it's nice to see a happy moment in all of this misery. Now this is in the aftermath of the battle that we saw last week, and there's Jason Lannister's head on a spike along with his lions. In medieval times, and in this franchise in general, it was a common thing to put slain enemies' heads on spikes, and Joffrey did something with Ned that was quite similar. "Ned, you bastard," they used to say. "Ned, you bastard. Ned, you bastard.
Bessie.
Oh, Bessie! Ah, get out! Oh, fucking hell. Whew. But I did wonder if this might be a reference to the book. After the battle, Kristen actually came across people who'd fallen in the fight, arranged in a mock feast. But that's probably a reach though. Roddy Roon then starts a song which tells the tale of the battle. He says they had 10,000 men, but we had more. That's roughly true as well, as the force they won with had over 12,000 men, whereas the losers had just 8,000 according to the source material. We then see Alicent Blackwood saying that they pressed them to the bloody shore. In the book, the Black forces pushed the Lannisters into the reeds of the God's Eye and then attacked them from 3 sides. The Westermen were driven back foot by foot into the waters of the God's Eye. 100 died there, cut down whilst fighting in the reeds. 100 more drowned as they tried to flee, which is why they're referred to fish feed. Alicent is also a big badass in the book, and though she just appears briefly here, I do think we'll see more of her. She actually fought at the Battle of the Burning Mill, which was a bloody fight that we saw the aftermath of in Season 2. Her brother Lord Samuel Blackwood was also killed by Sir Amos Bracken, and she took revenge and shot an arrow through the slit of Bracken's helm. She's also the aunt of fan favourite Benjicott Blackwood. Sadly missing is Sabitha Frey, who the Winter Wolves met before the battle, and is someone who would bunk with Alicent while campaigning. Also known as Black Ally, she was one of the few who fought from the start to the end of the Civil War. We then hear them say they couldn't see the water and then chant fish feed. Fish feed was an alternative name for the battle, and like I said, it was a very bloody affair. Lastly, Roddy sings Ashes for the Reeds, making light of the countless enemies killed in the water. Now, we never saw the battle, so it's a bit of a miss there, but this is just akin to the kind of songs that we had in the books and shows, which allow great moments to live on through oral history. It's much like Egg singing about his family's victory during the Blackfyre Rebellion and Night of the Seven Kingdoms, or the Reigns of Castamere. And I think it's just a nice bit of camaraderie and world building. All the while, someone's preparing fish, which really sends home the meaning of the song. On top of that, the Tullys literally have a fish on their armor, and yeah, this is just a big victory for the Blacks. I don't actually think Daemon's looked this happy since, like, the very first season when he led the Gold Cloaks on a killing spree. Daemon then says, with his one good eye, he looks a prick about Aemond. Now, I can't quite make out what Alicent says after this, but with the next line about shoving it up your arse, I can kinda guess. However, the song then ends as Simon Strong arrives at camp. He's brought them wine to celebrate the battle at the Red Fork and the Lakeshore, but along with this comes a message from the Queen that says that Jace is dead. Now, I did actually expect Daemon to take this news out on someone, but he keeps his composure and tells the army that they're to march south and meet him at King's Landing. They also have to leave a garrison at Harrenhal, and once the capital's been taken, he'll send dragons to provide them cover. One major problem though. The dragon seeds have buggered off and are back at Dragonstone, so Harrenhal's now defenseless, which leads to Aemond taking it easily. The reaction is pretty different to the book though, and Daemon isn't too bothered if it falls. There, once he'd heard that Aemond was heading to Harrenhal, he simply said it was past time and departed for King's Landing. Aemond then went and found the castle empty, which is a lot different to what we see later on in the scene that's a callback to Season 2. And it kind of feels like a mirror of Daemon's arrival there, albeit a bit more bloody. Rest in peace, Simon Strong. In the book, Daemon then departed for the capital directly and joined Rhaenyra over Aegon's Hill for the assault on King's Landing. As such, all the stuff at Dragonstone with Daemon is new for the show, but I actually really appreciate the changes. Meeting with Alice, she then says,
I've seen that your coming has been an omen of the end.
Which yeah, it kind of is. She sent Daemon on his journey by showing him what his role is in the Song of Ice and Fire, and she mentioned omens in the Season 2 finale.
There are omens here for those who seek them.
By helping Daemon at Luigi's mansion, she's managed to get 40,000 rivermen to support the Queen. She did this by guiding Daemon with her visions, and rightly thinks that she should be given Harrenhal. Her requesting the castle isn't out of place either, as it does foreshadow the later part of her story. Now at this point in the book, she was actually at Harrenhal with Aemond, as the battle we saw last week took place after the One-Eyed Prince had taken the cursed castle back. But yeah, Like Matt Smith says, there's lots of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff going on. Sorry, wrong doctor there. Most of Daemon's story with Alice is new though, as even the book explains that her feminine powers didn't work on Daemon and little was said of the pair's time. Overall though, she's just sick of seeing her change hands and constantly be given to the wrong people. Alice is also far older than she seems, and the fact she's watched it change hands so many times confirms that she's very, very old. I do even wonder if she views the constant state of flux as being a curse akin to the Iron Throne. Now, in case you don't know, the throne was said to slice those who weren't deemed worthy of rule. This is why it cut Viserys in Season 1, which eventually led to an infection. Harrenhal is said to have a curse in it as well, and in Season 1, Larys weaponized this and used it to cover for him killing his brother and father. The episode also sees the death of Simon and his family, and we could have a case of those who are unfit to rule here being taken by the curse. She is truly the only one who seems to understand Harrenhal, and I even wonder if, with her occult practices, if she's causing the curse herself. But Daemon says the crown is not in the habit of giving out castles to midwives. In the book, she's referred to as being a wet nurse, but the show shows that she is clearly more.
And is midwife the sum of what you think I am?
She called herself a witch when greening the dragon seeds, and we have a theory about what she's going to lead to down the line that I do hope we get confirmation by the show's end. Beyond that, I even wonder if she's kind of the precursor for Melisandre and might be someone who teaches her her abilities. Daemon then says he will speak to the Queen about another reward, but she says that nothing else will satisfy her hunger and to not come back here. As he departs, she also says, "Remember what I said."
You will die in this place.
Daemon then departs on Caraxes, which seems like as good a time as any to tell you about our brand new Caraxes t-shirt. Available at the merch store below. There we have this brand new tee with this amazing design by Sheridan, and you can also get a double-sided version as well. Beyond that, we've also upgraded the fabric on these so they're tight around the chest and biceps and then loose around the stomach, and you'll look bloody fantastic, mate. We also have our sheep stealer inspired one as well, and a big sale where the more you buy, the more money that you save. We then cut to Alan's search for his father as Baela lands and talks to him. She says that many people have believed that her grandfather is dead, but that time and time again, he's proven them all wrong. Several times he's been at death's door, and this was also a big point in Season 2. Now this scene shows a difference between the kids, and Baela is very much to the manner born. She lived a life of riches, while Adam had to live with the rags. She explains how Corlys loved Rhaenys, and that he tried to forget about Alan and Adam for her sake. This is something that was mentioned in the book as well, as that Corlys ended the tryst so he didn't anger Rhaenys. Turns out that Adam told them they were indeed related, but in the book, it was Corlys who brought his bastards to the Red Sowing as he knew they could be potential dragon riders. In the show, their parentage has been a secret until now, and she then says how Corlys is proud to a detriment, which is the side that Alan's only known. Calls back to when he said that Corlys and Laenor would come to buy sweet treats while Adam and him were struggling to get by. Meanwhile, Adam is looking for Corlys from the Heir. Again, I did think this was a missed opportunity by not having them fully participate in the Battle of the Gullet like how they were in the book. I just think Adam would have been there for his dad, and it would have reflected Jace nicely. But he does indeed find Corlys, and at this point he's like, harder to kill than John McClane. We then cut to Larys and Aegon, who are on their way to Dragonstone. It's a mirror of last week, with them once more on the back of a raven cart. Aegon doesn't want to talk to him though, as he's exposed who he is, and it's kind of like a comedy double act at this point. Aegon played the situation stupidly due to his ego, and Larys says that the king needlessly antagonized their captors. Now, Trey Magnum actually did an interview with the cast where Tom talked about how they initially had Aegon kneeling.
And originally in the script, it had Aegon being told to kneel for Rhaenyra and kneeling straight away. And I'd questioned that. I thought that doesn't feel right at all. I feel like it's the only thing he's got left to be defiant in that. And also, he's not used to being submissive.
Which I do think fits the character more. They're still heading towards the coast though, which was part of Larys' plan, albeit going in it in a roundabout way. I feel like Larys is skirting quite close to defeat, and not just because he likes defeat.
Ha ha!
We then see as their carriage stops as a Triarchy soldier opens the door. Matthew Needham is absolutely hilarious in this moment as well as he delivers the line,
"I was mistaken, I am surprised."
Larys is then shocked that Tyrion Lannister managed to convince the Triarchy to join them against Rhaenyra, but as we saw last week, that was a disaster. One of the guards then struggles to get the prisoners back in the carriage, but Larys uses quick thinking to knock him out with a cage, while Aegon stabs the poor Staunton lad in the side. I think it shows how he's still dangerous and is kind of setting things up for down the line and Aegon's big arc. Aegon then says that he's going to Rook's Rest instead of Duskendale, which is where Larys wants to buy passage. The road there is long and perilous, but Aegon mentions that Criston has a garrison, which is also something that Criston mentioned in Season 2.
I left a meager garrison behind to protect it.
So Sunfire is there, but in the book he was heavily damaged, and though he tried to fly, he couldn't take to wing, as they say. I'll talk about what that leads to in the spoiler section, as they might be changing something, and this could impact things down the line. We then cut to Corlys saying one of his biggest lines from the book.
If this be victory, I hope I never see another.
Now, I don't want to rag on it too much again, because I know Steve Toussaint is a good actor, but it feels like they just kind of did the first take. And I don't know, when reading it, it carried a lot more emotion in my head. The line in the source material came after he was congratulated on the victory, and their Adam and Alan also sought out their father after the battle. However, no one knew what they actually discussed, so this scene appears to be inspired by that bit. Corlys then says he has nothing to give Alan except his name, but he's happy with this as it's worth far more than a mountain of gold. Being legitimized and accepted by his dad is all he's ever wanted, and him being pulled under his wing just clearly means the world to him. Now, I do wonder if Laenor is going to be pulled back into the series as well. Unlike the book, he went off to live his life, and we know that he's out there somewhere in the wild. So he is a bit of a wild card and could potentially return. Beyond that though, if you've seen A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, then you will know just how powerful that names and titles are in Westeros. We saw it in Game of Thrones as well with Ramsay, who became a true Bolton. Corlys did say to Rhaenyra in Season 2 that he would wish to make her his heir, and she said that it should go to someone of salt and sea, as she was blood and fire. Corlys then had a newfound affection for his two sons, and that will play a major role moving forward. However, he will still need to petition to the Queen to make it legitimate, which is something that he had to do in the book. Although, they could just be skipping that, because this scene kind of achieves the same thing, and yeah, it would be a bit redundant, I think. Back at King's Landing, we then see as Alicent watches as Vhagar flies over the Dragon Pit, which is more foreshadowing for where this King's Landing plot will go. But he's leaving, and she can now enact her plan to ensure the city puts up as little resistance as possible, so her former BFF can take it. It's vastly different in the book, where this whole plan never took place and Rhaenyra simply just stormed it. Alicent then heads to Luther Lodgend, who's the commander of the City Watch. She walks through their changing rooms as well, and it wouldn't be Game of Thrones without a little bit of cock somewhere. Now in the book, Otto installed Gwaine Hightower as the commander's second in command, as it was thought that Lodgend was not massively committed to Aegon's claim to the throne. As such, Gwaine was asked to keep an eye out for any sign of disloyalty. His sister, though, has replaced him in the show and made it so she's actually trying to get him to turn on the Greens. Here she tells him that Rhaenyra is coming back and that Queen Helena will allow the city to be taken over. It's a very bold plan, Cotton. Let's see how it pays off for him, and ultimately it amounts to treason and also the death of her father, which I think makes her realise that she may have fucked up.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
We then cut to Dragonstone, where the Seeds get a dressing down from Daemon. Again, there are more changes here, as in the book, Ulf and Hugh were at the Battle of the Gullet. Afterwards, they drank and celebrated, saying how they should be lords. Here, though, they return after being frightened by the creatures near Harrenhal and also Alice Rivers. So, they're just standing around, thinking that the Queen needs them. In the end, they're intimidated by Daemon, and Ulf Ever the Doofus says as he walks in,
"The Rogue Prince himself."
Which obviously isn't a nickname that he's too fond of. It also cracked me up how he just cowers after not getting a response. The nickname was actually the title of a novella by George R.R. Martin that told the story of Daemon and was later included in the expanded edition of Fire and Blood. Daemon is also shocked that the pair are at Dragonstone, as they say.
We are just returned from Harrenhal. And the Gullet.
In the opening, we did see a bunch of other dragons as well, and looking back, this was likely there. However, it was nowhere near the extent that they were there in the book. So, it does seem like they did play a part at least during the Battle of the Gullet. However, it didn't really have the repercussions that they have in the text. Daemon is just confused and furious though, as he says they waited just 2 days after being ordered to pursue Vhagar.
Adam left too.
Also, love how Ulf is quick to throw Adam under the bus as well, and it shows that he's far from honourable. Matt Smith's delivery here is excellent as well, as he just says they're not required to think. Cracks me up that Daemon then backhands off as he explains the spookiness they experienced in the woods. Daemon then says their erring will cost them dearly, which is something we see later as Aemond's taking of Harrenhal's a cakewalk. It also lays the groundwork for some big things later on, and the way Daemon treats them is going to cause some issues. In Ulf's mind, he should have a castle and be treated like royalty, but now he's just shitting in the woods and getting smashed like the like button. So this is kind of laying the seeds with the seeds, and I do appreciate the way this scene sets things up down the line. Also love the way that Hugh asks what they should do next, and Daemon just leaves without responding. And yeah, we've all been there at work where we're pissed off the boss doing something and being like, what should I do next? And they just don't respond. And I relate to it. We then see Rhaenyra's inconsolable and Daemon reunites with Mysaria. In the book, she was more of Daemon's mistress of whisperers and disappeared after Blood and Cheese until returning when Rhaenyra took King's Landing. Here though, she plays a much bigger part and is also clearly after her own goals. Daemon's also surprised that she's out, as when he left Dragonstone, she was merely just a prisoner. However, he offered her freedom in exchange for helping the Son of a Son plot, which Rhaenyra later honoured. He's no doubt still furious that she was selling secrets to Otto though, which then led to Aegon being put on the throne. The pair also had a relationship, of course, for years and years, but that couldn't go anywhere due to the status that she had as a madam of a brothel. I do think though that the pair genuinely loved each other at some point, but now they're both kind of burned by each other. Daemon then asks if she believes the Queen's judgment sound, and if following Alicent's plan's a good idea. He then does a little jab at her and asks if it would pain her if Alicent and Rhaenyra still had a bond. James Bond. They do seem to agree though that Alicent is a conspirator as opposed to a deceiver, and as such, her making this all up as a trap is simply not in her nature. At the heart of it, the former friends simply want what's best for the realm, but whatever friendship they had, I think, is unfixable come the close of this episode. But they were best pals at the start of season 1, just like Mysaria and Daemon, and it shows how this civil war has just driven people apart. Now in the book, Daemon and Mysaria were allowed to sleep together as Rhaenyra's desires were met by eating. Rhaenyra eventually put on a shit ton of weight. I don't think they're doing it in the show, but it made the people view her as ghastly, whereas once she was known as the realm's delight. I actually wonder as well if Mysaria and Daemon might hook back up, especially since she kissed Rhaenyra. If he finds out about that as well, it could lead to a very messy entanglement that causes further division. But they're then interrupted by the Maester, who states that Vhagar's heading towards the Riverlands. It's at this point that we then cut to Alicent at King's Landing. So Rickard Thorne thinks that she shouldn't be going out alone, and it seems like she ducked him at the Kingswood and then dipped out to Dragonstone. He then says the atmosphere is fraught, and actually plays a pretty big role later in the book. In the source material, Larys also smuggled out Princess Jaehaera and Prince Maela. However, Maela isn't in the show, and later on we see them taking Jaehaera themselves. He also sent Sir Rickard and Sir Willisfell with them to act as protection. However, as that's not happened in the series, the character's still at King's Landing. In the book, the Queen also sent out people after the Knights, and they were discovered while trying to hide out at the Hog's Head when someone found Maelor's dragon egg. He was killed trying to flee, and this left Maelor at the mercy of the people at Bitterbridge. They were then undecided about what to do, and debated sending him to Rhaenyra or to Ormond Hightower, who was nearby. The book then explains that it's disputed about how he died, but his remains were then sent to Rhaenyra by Lady Caswell. So lots of things kind of spun out from that, but here he is, exacerbated with Alicent as she asks where the captain of the household god is. She then explains that she'll be having a meeting, but as we know, she is going to get the household god to stand down. At Dragonstone, Daemon then says that Jace died fighting for his queen, which was his desire, and that sons usually defy their mothers. And yet, defying is something that Daemon knows all about. But in this society, it's the sons of noble houses' role to go out and fight, and they often act against the wishes of their parents. It normally isn't put on the mothers, but because of the way that Rhaenyra is the queen in the situation and people kind of doubt her for it, in his mind, Jace was doing something that was his duty. However, on the flip side of this, Rhaenyra thinks that Jace's death was avoidable. She also tells Daemon about how there were reports of sheep stealers in the skies above the Gullet, and that he also had a rider. I expect that this will be a mystery for the couple to unravel as time goes by, and Daemon says he'll investigate it. I think that he will learn it was Rhaenyra, and this will cause some conflict between him and his wife. Jace obviously wasn't his son, so he won't be bothered by that, but I think Rhaenyra will probably want vengeance. Now, I do have a theory, So yes, I have a theory about how things will get out. Rhaenyra obviously should have been on the ship sailing for Pentos, and no doubt when it gets there, Daemon will be informed that his daughter wasn't on it. Sheepstealer has been sighted in the Vale as well, and I think when he learns that, he'll put 2 and 2 together. Anyway, that's the end of theory. You get the idea with that. I think this scene is when the grim reality hits that Rhaenyra's kids have died just so she can sit on a chair. Daemon then says to not let them die in vain, and that he saw the Song of Ice and Fire and a woman in the desert with 3 dragons. This is of course Dany, and Daemon must ensure that this happens so she can go ahead and help defeat the Night King, and then turn heel and ravage King's Landing. A bit like Rhaenyra in this episode in a way. Yay! But he basically spoils all of Game of Thrones and appeals to her by asking what she would do if it's true. This then gets her to get her arse in gear, which I am a big fan of. I did feel like them making Rhaenyra as mopey as she's been has been a big issue with the series, as in the book, she's a bit more of a dickhead. Like, you know those classic Game of Thrones characters where they have loads of shit happen to them, but they're still like, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to be a massive dickhead. That sort of thing. I feel like had they kept it the 10-episode season, which was initially planned, that they could have had her moping around after Jacerys death last time, and then kick things off with season 3, she's taken King's Landing and is sitting on the throne and then dealing with the fallout. We then cut to Alicent, who's preparing a bag to leave King's Landing. You might notice that she's wearing all blue as well, which is something that she donned at the start of season 1. It was only at the wedding that she started wearing green, and this was the signal she was fighting for her place. But going back to blue kind of highlights she's returned more to her season 1 persona and is stepping away from the war. However, she's confronted by Lord Jasper, who seems salty that she took power when she was younger by getting close to Viserys. Slowly revealed that he's come there to assault her after saying how she found much enjoyment with Kristen Cole. Now, I did kind of wonder what this scene was actually for, but he does mention her meeting with the City Watch and then continues to force himself upon her. The guy also mentions his wife in his final words as well, but I don't know, this just kind of came out of nowhere. Goes from like 0 to 100. I do feel like they probably needed at least one scene before this where Jasper made a move before it ramped up to this. Kind of like what they did with Andor season 2 with Bix. Seemed reckless of him to do this during the day, however I suspect that he may be doing this because he's the master of laws. He expected he could get away with this and was also likely going to turn her in to be arrested for conspiring with the City Watch. Luckily though, they're interrupted by Orwell and Ser Soren, and the Grand Maester is shocked and has Jasper arrested. Now, I did also expect Orwell to actually ask what was going on, but he doesn't seem to want to pry for some reason, which leads to him almost losing his head. Again! And I kinda hope we get like a running joke every episode where the character almost gets beheaded. Either way, we then cut to Rhaenyra, who's getting ready to take King's Landing. The shot paints her as dark and powerful, almost evil in a way. This foreshadows how the small folk will see the former realm's delight, and they're terrified by the dragons flying over the city. She's then offered sympathies from the lords, but explains she's off to take the capital with her husband. In the book, the Sea Snake ships and assisted the Queen by heading into Blackwater Bay, where they were led by the turncoat Gullclux. Here though, there's no cover, as her advisors say. She's done talking though, and says to let Sir Laurent choose how he will die. This implies that he will indeed be granted his request for his life to be forfeit, which is quite a big thing for her to do. It shows that she's stepping towards being merciless and is a pretty big book change, which we'll explain later in the spoiler section. But it does seem like she's going down a darker path. Mysaria then hands her the crown, and this symbolically also carries a lot of weight. This crown belonged to both Jacerys and Viserys, and both were keepers of the peace. However, the realm's now descended into war, so it's been twisted like Rhaenyra. Mysaria says that she hopes the Queen will send for her and to remember which one of them's been faithful. The dragon seeds are also with them as well, and Daemon says they're to provide cover, and he seems to single out Ulf. He says they're not to have any ideas, and clearly doesn't value him. I like as they walk as well, we also see Syrax and Caraxes snuggling up, and we might have some shagging dragons there. Flying over the wreckage of the Gullet, they then make their way to King's Landing while Alicent begins her plans to ensure that there's no resistance when they arrive. Helena is looking at bugs once again, just like she's done with the spiders in the previous entry. She says that it's not the season, and in her book, it seems like she's researching Alcium of Nath, aka a butterfly. The text also appears to be written by her, as it says, "They are said to cause death to people around them, but so far I remain alive." Nath is also known as the Isle of Butterflies, and it is said that they protect the island. This is actually an important location as well, as it's where Missandei is from in the main show. That line of text though, I also wonder if that's intended to foreshadow something coming down the line as well. Though Helena seems cool in the show at this point, in the book, she's locked in her bedchamber, completely losing her mind. Also wondered, right, and bear with me here, might be reaching, but I did think this might even be Ryan Condal clapping back at George R.R. Martin. Now, in case you don't know, Martin actually wrote a blog named Beware the Butterflies, which discussed his disappointment with Season 2. He explained that the changing of Blood and Cheese, along with the removal of Maelord, created a butterfly effect that means Helaena will not have a reason to do what she does later down the line. This basically talked about how minor changes mean that things are not going to be as impactful when the story wraps up. Now, we did kind of touch upon it last week with the Battle of the Gullet and how Rhaenyra's kids Aegon and Jacerys weren't part of the conflict. They actually play major roles down the line, so it was a bit weird seeing them completely absent from something that's such a pivotal moment. The young Aegon especially is very, very important, and he was completely absent there, so I can imagine Martin's also going to be a bit annoyed about that too. So yeah, beware the butterflies being connected to Helaena, and the butterfly here. I did wonder if that was Condell clapping back a bit, but maybe I'm reading too far into it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Am I insane? Yes. But Alicent then says that they need to stand down the household god, and this is her chance to get some sort of redemption. She failed with Aegon and Aemond, but if she can save Helaena, then it won't be for nothing. They then head out to the battlements, where Alicent basically speaks for her daughter to get them to stand down. It's a lot different in the book, as there she tried to send out as many ravens as she could to the Leal Lords. She also attempted to send a message to Aemond to get him to return, which unfortunately never reached him. She then arranged the city's defense in Aemond's absence, including shutting the gates, which the Gold Cloaks ended up opening. Here though, Alicent's the complete opposite, and she reminds them that Helena's in charge, and says that she will have no beast harmed. The guards are kinda hesitant at first as well, but she's basically like, look mate, we're screwed. Fucking dragons everywhere, so you can subscribe or be burned. Your choice. She was also clearly hoping to escape after this, but gets caught in the end. We then cut to Criston Cole looking up at the skies as Vhagar arrives. The guy's taking a break from doing his arts and crafts, but we can see a shield for House Rosby and also House Stokeworth. The soldiers then cheer as Criston Cole says it's going to Harrenhal. We then cut to Aemond and Vhagar, and this sends a torrent of bats out into the day, which does feel like a dark omen. As mentioned earlier, it's also the second time in the show that a lone dragon rider has taken the castle, with this moment mirroring Daemon in Season 2. However, I think it's actually supposed to reflect Aegon the Conqueror, with Aemond seeing himself as the second coming. In Aegon's conquest, he actually stormed this castle after they refused to bend the knee and burned it, much like we see here. This is something shown in the tapestry at the start, and this moment is clearly evoking that, especially because Aemond also carries Aegon's sword. In the book, the place was empty save for the Strongs, but I think this is very important to show how ruthless that Aemond is. It's a savage scene as Vhagar burns the garrison outside, just like Dany in the main show. Like his uncle, Aemond also enters the hall to find the Strongs, and I love how the servants run out. Where things differ though is that Daemon accepted Simon Strong pledging fealty to the Blacks, but Aemond simply asks him to draw his weapon. This is just like the book, where Aemond demands that Simon Strong should be given a sword. He then says that it's in the hands of the gods and challenges him to a duel, which yeah, it's very one-sided. Aemond of course has a lot of beef with their very strong boys, and I think he has his eye patch off because it's their family that took it originally. Or so he suspected. We cannot confirm or deny if the Jason Lucerys were very strong boys. But yeah, he's come to get revenge and doesn't want to give them anything but death. In the book, this was simply after some pleading, but in the show, Aemond just stabs him without honour. The two sons as opposed to the grandsons are then killed, but one manages to stand against him. He gets him in the side, which eventually causes him to collapse. Alicent arrives like a good Samaritan, and he's of course going to be indebted to her. She's also going to be indebted to him as well, as she's finally seen her oppressors being taken down. Now this is different in the book, as she was simply kept as a prize for Aemond's bed. But I do like this addition, and just as she's being cast to the side, a new person arrives to basically help prop her up. You might also notice that Aemond has the cat's paw dagger as well. This of course carries a prophecy, and it's something the pair could potentially discover. May make Aemond realise why his mother betrayed the Greens, and also possibly make him think that he has to carry on the legacy. If we're right about what comes down the line with Alice and Aemond that we talked about in the spoiler section last week, then knowing this prophecy would be very, very important. Back at King's Landing, the Queen's group then arrive, and thankfully the house gods stand down. And to be fair, you would, wouldn't you? The place would end up like Lothric Castle. This foreshadows Dany's eventually turn as well, and how the horror of dragons will bring ruin to the city. Just like the book, the small folk flee, but it's a bit more peaceful with them not being harmed. In the text, they scramble for their lives and hid, while Alicent, Helaena and Jaehaera hold up in Maegor's holdfast. That was with Jasper and Otto, and the latter is revealed to have been captured and kept prisoner by Larys Strong. We then see Hugh's wife Kat, and I did notice that Hugh never mentioned that his wife was back in King's Landing. This scene is also very similar to when they had to leave in Season 2 Episode 5, and he's kind of left her and their kid, which I think is going to have lots of repercussions. I actually really expect something bad to happen to Kat, which will then lead to the rest of Hugh's story in the book. We then see more of the small folk and cut to Ulf's old drinking buddies who see him flying over the city. And man, he really showed them. I also love that the guy on the left is played by Samson Kayo, who is in Truth Seekers with Emma Darcy. We then see Sylvie, who was the lady of the night that Aemond frequented, because, yeah, does that guy have some mummy issues? Also, shout out to Rhaenyra, bloody Rhaenyra last week, for also pointing out that the brothel was called Mother's. And he went there because he had mummy issues, which is subtext.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
The dragons then land outside the Red Keep, and this scene reminds me a lot of when Rhaenyra and Daemon returned to King's Landing in Season 1. There, they journeyed to ensure Rhaenyra's claim was cemented, as well as the future title for Jacerys. Here though, they've come to take what's rightfully Rhaenyra's, and the guards outside then surrender. Daemon then correctly says that the true test is inside. Now these are where the loyalist soldiers are posted up, as they'd be closest to the royals, and not like instantly putting down their swords like the guys here. We then get a big fight scene which goes down in the room where Cersei had a map painted. Also, kinda hated how Rhaenyra was simply told to wait, as I feel like that makes her look weak. However, the book does say, only when he was certain that the defenders would offer him no harm did he signal for his wife, the Queen, to descend upon Syrax. It also just lets Daemon be a badass as well, and in the work, he's pretty much Rhaenyra's enforcer. I love the way that Daemon sticks the last guard too, and then he's just held up by the weapon. He then slits his throat, and then I think he beheads him as well. Complete overkill. And though I had my criticisms with stuff last week, I think we get so many good scenes back to back here. It was difficult not to be enamored by it. They then head to the throne room and make light work of any opposition before being outmanned by the household guard. It looked almost too easy when they entered, but the soldiers come streaming in to protect the throne. Now this shows how symbolic this whole thing is, because like, yeah, there's no one else sat on it, and yeah, who gives a shit if you go up and sit there? Having this throne definitely doesn't win the war, and it's just a thing that shows power but doesn't actually grant it. And yeah, just seeing them guard a chair, you realise how dumb it was. In a good way, I mean, as well. I think the episode is purposely being like, all this stuff, the kids are dying for nothing. Rhaenyra then draws her sword and the soldiers laugh, but thankfully the gold cloaks arrive and choose the side of Largen's former leader. The book also has a cold as fuck line at this moment, which is sadly missing from the show. But in that he says, Daemon gave us these cloaks, and they're gold no matter how you turn them. He then stabs one of the high-ups in the high towers, who I won't spoil in case they give him a death later on. We'll talk about in the spoiler section though, but I did kind of feel like it was a shame this line was missing. Instead, it's changed to,
it was Prince Daemon himself who gave me this gold cloak 20 years ago.
Which, maybe sometimes leave it to George, mate. In the book, it was actually Alicent who surrendered the castle after leaving Maegor's holdfast, and the soldiers, King's Guard, and any high towers were arrested. This also included Gwaine, who in the show is currently with Kristen. In the book, they also found Helena locked up in the bedchamber, but I like the idea that she's caught alongside Alicent. Daemon then goes to see Orwell, and we get a similar scene to the one that we had with Aemond last week. He pledges fealty to Rhaenyra and says he only sided with the Greens out of fear for his life. He then offers up Jasper, Wilde, and Otto, and we cut to Helena and Alicent trying to leave the city with Jaehaera. Some ladies behind them seem to spot them, and yeah, they're the most famous people in the kingdom, so they've got no chance of sneaking out. Daemon then orders some people to be freed, who I expect were the ones loyal to Rhaenyra after the Green Small Council declared for Aegon. One of them's Lady Fell, who refused to kneel for Aegon in Season 1. However, in the book, she was actually killed after that, but they've kept her alive in the show. This is the same for Lord Merryweather, who both appear later in the throne room. Further into the prison, we then see Jasper Wilde, who's in a bad way, but we get a surprise that I really wasn't expecting. The jailer says that there is a gift for Daemon, which turns out to be Otto Hightower. The last proper time we saw him, he was stripped of the Hand of the King position and said he was returning to Old Town to mentor Prince Darren. However, in the finale, it turned out that he was captured and was shown in a cell. It was a bit of a shock, as this didn't happen in the book, and for like the last 2 years I've wondered, what happened to Otto? However, turns out it was the machinations of Larys. In episode 6 of season 2, Aemond agreed to appoint a Hand of the King, and Larys thought it would be him. However, he's just tasked with bringing Otto Hightower back to King's Landing so he can take up the position once more. Solaris doing this is clearly to get him out of the way, and yeah, with how close he is to Aegon right now, he's clearly still vying for that position. But seeing Otto is something that brings Daemon great joy, as these two have had beef since the very first episode. Otto was even sent to Dragonstone to get the egg that Daemon stole back, and wasn't happy with how Daemon commanded the Gold Cloaks. So Daemon is more than happy with his gift, even if it comes from Larys Strong. We then see the released prisoners, and it's a scene similar to the book where Rhaenyra doesn't sleep and just meets with the Lord so they can bend the knee. In the source material, she wants everyone to know that she's the rightful ruler, and projects this by sitting atop the throne and demanding the Lords kneel. Here though, she's hesitant to sit on the throne, and we learn there's a line waiting for her so they can all come in and bend the knee. The Gold Cloaks then bring in their prisoners, and Otto's paraded about the room, which is a grim reversal of his position in Season 1. In Episode 9, he had the position Rhaenyra does here, and demanded that people swore fealty to her. There, we also saw Lady Fell and Lord Merryweather, and I have said I'd wish some things had been set up earlier in the seasons, like Lowheart and Corlys's beef, but credit where it's due, some pretty good long-term storytelling here. Otto then says,
I assume everyone else is dead.
Which shows he doesn't understand his family at all. I definitely don't think he expected Aegon II to be ruined at Rook's Rest, and for Alicent to send Aemond away and then open up the gates. The only way the city would have fallen in his mind is if everyone on his side was dead. And yeah, you shouldn't have put your faith in so many idiots. My guy must have been like,
I love you, but you are not serious people.
Daemon then says that while Aegon's fled, a public execution of Otto will cement her as queen. He says she must not waver, lest she be seen as weak. Otto then delivers an insult by asking Daemon to do it so he's not hacked to death, and to be fair, the kill isn't clean. But my motto, fuck Otto, I get 7 digits from me mother for $1 tomorrow. Terrible. But this moment is very similar to how Theon Greyjoy had to kill Sir Roderick when he took Winterfell, only to end up taking ages to chop his head off. Daemon then hands her dark sister, which is the ancient blade of Visenya Targaryen. She was the sister wife to the Conqueror himself, and is someone whom Rhaenyra looked up to for inspiration in Season 2. She's also a character who was involved in the usurping plot, and I feel this signals that while she looked up to the character, she is really struggling with the costs that it actually takes to rule. And yeah, hacks away and just turns into a big ball of snot. Luckily though, she has Daemon who hypes her up, but she's far from the strong warriors of old. I feel like this is the first test that Rhaenyra has to take to really prove herself, and unfortunately she kind of stumbles at the first hurdle. I think it shows she's just not fit to grapple with this role, and clearly, you know, isn't good at killing people. Yet anyway. Before dying, Otto also says he did his best, and Rhaenyra cries before lopping his head off for good. The pair executing Jasper and Otto is also like when Daemon killed Vaemond in what is pretty much the exact same spot. Now in the book, Jasper is adamant that Rhaenyra isn't the queen until the end, but these lines appear to be more like the King's Guard earlier in the scene. We then see Rhaenyra walk through the blood, which is similar to Daemon's vision that saw him do the same. It's not exactly the triumphant march to the throne that people were expecting, and she simply slowly walks up to it, which mirrors Viserys' climb in Season 1. She leaves a trail of blood behind her, and rather than being glorious, it's kind of low-key, which I think works well with what the show's going for. She doesn't seem relieved at all. This has cost her kids, and the worst part is yet to come. Also feel like it's playing off the visions in Season 2, as their Viserys said to Daemon that the weight of the crown is crushing, and she's kind of been forced to do this out of necessity. Then goes from bad to worse as Alicent and Helena are dragged in just in time to see Otto's corpse. Rhaenyra then looks stern, and I feel like the friendship is finally over. Ultimately, Alicent had kept her word, but I don't feel like she expected it to go this way. So this may lead to a further breakdown of communication when they were almost reconciling, and I feel like she's going to be like, this isn't what we agreed to. I do think she'll see this as a betrayal and might not be so forthcoming with helping quell tensions with the Greens. So yeah, I expect that we will have Alicent locked up, and this death may push Helena over the edge. Literally. Anyway, that takes us to the spoiler section, in which we'll go through what happens in the book and also some of the things in this episode that set up things to come. If you're ducking out at this point again, thank you so much for sitting up until this point of the video. I know the videos are long, I know the breakdowns are a bit fucking long, especially when you watch like an hour of television, but I really appreciate you guys sitting through it. You guys make it worth putting all this extra effort in, and I just want this to be as thorough as possible, and without you guys it wouldn't be worth doing, so thank you. Now, after this, Alicent becomes known as the Queen in Chains, and she pleads for the rest of her children's lives. Leads to some cold lines, which I fully expect we'll get next week when we deal with the aftermath of what's just transpired. In the book, Alicent was actually spared, with Rhaenyra saying it was for the sake of our father who loved you once. Orwell is also alive and has quite a story in the book, but he was sent to the dungeons immediately after this. Gwen was also the one who was stabbed when the gold cloaks turned, but obviously they're not doing that in the show, and instead I think they gave that death scene to Otto. As for Rhaenyra in the book, she got up from the throne only to be cut by it. As I mentioned earlier, this does signify that she's unfit to rule and is quite a bad omen. I expect that will happen in episode 3, and it will basically start off the arc with the city beginning to hate her. Now in the episode, we also had Lauren Marban offer up his life as a forfeit for locking up Rhaenyra. She even says, let him decide how he will die, and this is something which I feel is foreshadowing his book death. In the source material, King's Landing experiences rioting due to how the small folk have been treated, and this is hastened by Larys Strong's whisperers. Lauren then led 100 men into Flea Bottom in a bid to stop the rioting, only to die in the fighting. So I do wonder if he'll accept some kind of insane mission to help his queen at the risk of his own life. Beyond that, the biggest change of the show is how Rhaenyra's ended up back at the Vale with the dragon. As we mentioned, her story matches that of Nettles in the book. In that, Nettles apparently ended up sleeping with Daemon, even though some reports said he treated her like a daughter. Mysaria then appeared at King's Landing, and she basically told Rhaenyra that the pair had got together. This then led to the Queen descending into a fit of rage and demanding the girl's head. However, with Rhaenyra being his daughter, and I know the show's got incest in it, mate, I've seen it enough times, but I do feel like they're not going to do that with Daemon. Instead, I think the series will likely take inspiration from the line, doted upon the brown girl as a man might dote upon his daughter. So I feel like Daemon might protect Rhaenyra instead, and due to Sheepstealer killing Jacerys, then that will be what causes the rift. In the book, Nettles also reportedly hid out at the Vale, and the Vale Mountain clans called her the Fire Witch. So that could be something that they do with Rhaenyra, and no, I've kind of gone back and forth over whether I like them combining her character with Nettles, but I think that would be the best way to handle it. So yeah. Let's see what they do. Give me a call if it's not too late. Fuck no, don't call me at all. I'll give you terrible advice. As for the other dragon seeds, we then get a heel turn with Ulf and Hugh. I think that's coming very soon, and kind of going to build off the way Daemon treated them. In the episode, we saw Ulf's wife Kat look up at the dragons arriving over King's Landing. Hugh seems to have forgotten about his wife and kid, but I feel like something may happen to her which will get him to turn. This is all building towards Rhaenyra's reign turning into a very bad one, and this is because the kingdom's basically been ransacked. She was left with no money in the royal coffers as Larys took it all for safekeeping. This meant that taxes were levied, which turned the small folk against her. This was to the point of even calling her King Maegor with teats. Rioting then ensued, and I do wonder if Hugh will be swept up in the anti-Rhaenyra wave and switch sides just like he does in the book. Ulf, yeah, it's obviously going to happen, and I think he's going to be spurred on by Daemon's bullying and the fact he resents not being treated like royalty. Now, regarding Alice Rivers, she boldly asks for Harrenhal. This actually sets up something later in the story, and if you watched our spoiler section from last week, we explained there that she's probably moving Daemon away so she can have Aemond's baby. I think if she sleeps with Aemond, it might make the castles her by blood, as she's technically tied to the royals. In the book, they called her the Witch Queen, and a small cut had congregated at Harrenhal a year after the Battle of the God's Eye. Knights were then sent to investigate, only to come back and report that she used magic to kill a lot of them. So I think the show will feature a lot of her future machinations to keep Harrenhal in the scenes with Aemond. Unless they do like Luigi's Mansion scenes with him as well for 8 episodes, which kill me if that's the case. Now regarding Aegon in the book, there was an attempt to retake the castle by Wallace Mouton. They succeeded and then attempted to kill Sunfire for good. It was an absolute disaster though, as the sound of the soldiers defeating those guarding the dragon woke the beast, and the attackers were then killed, which also included Wallace. It appears that the mutants have taken Rook's Rest at some point though between season 2 and now, as we can see them in the season 3 trailer. There Aegon's looking up, and we can see the mutant sigil on his shield. I think that he's heading to Rook's Rest to get his dragon back, and will likely get a shock when he turns up and find the garrison's taken over. Sunfire has been shown in the teasers as well, so we do know that he's coming back, and I think that's when this plot point will likely go down. Lastly, Helena was looking at her bugs, and in the book, we mentioned earlier how the butterfly usually means death, but the character's still alive. This sadly won't be for much longer though, and she's racked with grief over everything that's gone down. In the book, she supposedly jumped out of a window and fell onto the spikes below, which happened shortly after the battle above the God's Eye. She was also reportedly with child, and some say this was from the brothels. You see, kids, after trying to reach an agreement, Alicent called Rhaenyra's sons bastards and was like, oh, you see, it's not that bad, mate. Only bastard blood's been spilt. Which obviously annoyed her. In some tellings, Mysaria then reportedly sold the mother and daughter into prostitution, and Helena basically had to work the brothels. Maelor was then killed, her head was sent to Helena, which some said Rhaenyra did, and this basically, this life of pain and anguish just pushed her over the edge. Literally. Now though it might not have been Rhaenyra, that is what happened, and the death was blamed on her because of it, which also led to more rioting. Yay! Now I feel like that shot of her looking up in the Weeks Ahead trailer is this moment as it's going to happen in the series, and this might be going down right before she takes the leap. And I almost said takes a leak there. But yeah, that's it for this week's video, and huge thank you for joining me. Please drop a like and also drop a comment with your thoughts below. And if you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure that you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week, and if you click the join button you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. We have been going through the X-Files, we're currently on season 4 right now, breaking down everything, and that is out for members, so if you want to see that early, go and check it out. It's the low price of 99 cents a month, and for that you're gonna get like at least 52 hours a year worth of content. But to be honest, the way the videos are going at the moment, how long they are, you're probably gonna get 100 hours of content. So huge thank you if you do that, and again our merch store's below there too, so if you want to support the channel that way, again, really appreciate it. Now, if you want something else to watch, I don't know why you would, mate, you've just watched an hour of this shit or whatever, but if you want something else to watch, there's a video on screen right now. If not though, huge thank you for sitting through this one. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.